Hare Krishna. I welcome for Prabhupada Lilamrita reading. Hope everyone doing well. Yesterday we ended just on a prime time. Right, we are discussing about the Juhu temple project. Temple project, and now there's a big. Mr. N died. Mrs. N has created all this havoc, which has been she's sent gundas also, right, to demolish everything. ISKCON devotees got some kind of empathy or sympathy on this. So, right. So, anything else we want before we proceed? Let's see what happens. The demolition of our temple by the municipality has strengthened our position. The municipality standing committee has condemned the hasty action of the municipality and has agreed to reconstruct the shed at their cost. Not only that, the temporary construction shall continue to stay until the court decision is there as to who is the proprietor of the land. Under the circumstances, we should immediately reconstruct the deity shed. Barbed wire fencing should be immediately done to cover the naked land. And if possible, immediately in front of the deity shed, a temporary pandal should be constructed with our materials. If it is done so, if it's so done, then I can go to Bombay. I can go to Bombay and begin Bhagavad Parayana to continue until the court decision is there. Now, this is my design. Prabhupada also asked Giriraj to give full coverage of the temple demolition in his Hare Krishna monthly journal to life members. Prabhupada himself wrote an article for the monthly describing his movement and the events leading to the attack on the temple. He condemned the Bombay municipality for having the audacity to smash our temple against the law and principle of religious faith. A clique in Bombay, he said, that conspired to drive the devotees from there and from their land without returning their money. And he asked for sympathizers and life members of the Krishna conscious movement to come forward and help him at this difficult hour. Only about a dozen ISKCON life members responded to Srila Prabhupada's call. There were hundreds of life members in Bombay, each of whom had donated 1,111 rupees and were receiving Prabhupada's books. But when it comes to a personal commitment in a time of controversy, only a few were willing to help. Those who did help, however, were able to assist in ways that the innocent, naive, and uninfluential disciples of Prabhupada could not. The devotees begin to see the entire course of events as Krishna's mercy, since many life members were now rendering valuable service to Prabhupada and Lord Krishna. In the past, Prabhupada had stayed in the homes of many life members, reaching to them and their families, convincing them to his sincerity and of the noble aim of his movement. These friends and members like Bhagubai Patel, Bihari Lal Khandelwal, Brijatan Mahata, Dr. C. Bali, and others were acting not simply out of Hindu sentiment, but out of deep respect and affection for Prabhupada. So this, this is being restored. Prabhupada said, I will come there. Prabhupada asked to put in the Hare Krishna monthly journal. Prabhupada himself wrote an article about this, whatever this happens, there have been, it's against the law, audacity of mass our temple, and against the law and religious principles, or principle of religious faith. So we have been driven out from the land in unauthorized way, illegally. So Prabhupada sought help from the life members. Look at what has happened. As usual, so many life members, but when there is need, only a handful. But it only dozen came actually. After all these life members are receiving everything, but there's a need, nobody is there. But devotees understood that it is the Lord's arrangement. It's Krishna's mercy. The event took place. many life members now rendering valuable service to Prabhupada and Lord Krishna. Prabhupada stayed in many houses in the past. Many life members, he preached them. So these friends and members are some of the things are given that they all came to support this cause and help Prabhupada on this mission. Okay, AJ, please read.
Giriraj, working with Sada Jawatla, tried to convince the municipal council to authorize the rebuilding of the temple structure. While doing so, however, he discovered that Mrs. N had that very day, a Friday, filed for a court injunction preventing ISKCON from rebuilding. Justice Nain told Giriraj that he did not want to grant Mrs. N's request and that he would hear the devotees' case on the following Monday. This meant that the devotees had from Saturday morning to Monday morning 2 days to rebuild the temple. The devotees reasoned that although they had no actual permission to rebuild the temple, there was yet no law to stop them. If Justice Nain ruled against them, then to rebuild would be very difficult. They decided, therefore, to use the weekend to rebuild. Mr. Lal, a former contractor, helped arrange materials, bricks, mortars, asbestos sheets. Mr. Sethi offered a crew of laborers. At 8 p.m. on Friday, the masons began their work, continuing throughout the night despite the rain. And on Monday morning, when a judge learned of the new temple, he declared, "What is built, no one can destroy the temple." When Prabhupada heard the news, he considered it a complete victory. The temple had been rebuilt, and public opinion was swinging strongly in ISKCON's favor. So the devotees, were trying to figure out how they can rebuild the temple, and then they found out that Mr. N's wife had filed an injunction saying, to prevent them from rebuilding. The justice said, "You know what? I'm not going to decide today. I'll decide on Monday." So that meant they had, from Saturday till Monday to figure out what to do. So they decided, let's just rebuild the temple, right? They said there's no law saying we can't do it, so let's do it. So it sounds like some area people were able to get together the stuff they needed. The bricks and mortars and things like that, and a crew of laborers. And that on Friday night at 8, they began working, and they just continued to work through the night. And on Monday, when the judge heard about a new temple, he said, "Well, what's built is built, and you can't destroy it now." So Prabhupada, when he found out that they did this, he was like, "Hey, this we won. This is great news." So, and then people were pretty happy about it, it sounds like.
Isn't it? That's wonderful. I thought it'll go long in the court. So looks like, whatever build, we cannot demolish it. I missed this first part. Girish working and tried to convince municipal council to authorize the rebuild of the temple structure. While doing so, however, he discovered that Mrs. N had that very day filed for a court injunction preventing ISKCON from rebuilding. Okay. Justice Nain told Giriraj that he did not want to grant Mrs. N's request and that he would hear the devotee's case on Monday. So on Monday when the temple came, so basically he said, okay, just whatever built is built, that's it, no more hearing on this. Huh? This interesting case happened. At least so far, finally it ended up with so easily the victory. Didn't go very long in that court. That's very nice. So we'll move to the next. Let's see what happens. Wow, that's it. I think Prabhupada was sure that once that is built, they will not be able to kick them out. So that's why he was very. That's the trick. Looks like it worked. Prabhupada, they have occupied. From beginning, actually, he was doing that. Once you occupy, they will not be able to kick. Based on our contract, this is the understanding we had. They shouldn't be able to take out. And on top of that, because they had the temple, so no one can push them out. Okay, so I can prove it. New chapter 42.
Hare Krishna. Developing Mayapur. Mayapur, June 1st, 1973. Although the Mayapur building was not yet completed, Prabhupada had come there to reside. He took 2 adjoining rooms, one as his study and one as his bedroom on the second floor. Meanwhile, construction work continued in the temple room and in other parts of the building. On Prabhupada's first day there, a storm struck with massive black clouds and high winds. The storm was brief, however, and damage was minimal. I have just now come to Mayapur and am very hopeful to regain my strength and health on account of being in this transcendental atmosphere. Every moment we are passing here in great delight. In the evening, the temple pujari, Janani Vasa, would come to Prabhupada with a clay pot of red coals and frankincense and fan the frankincense until the room was filled with smoke. This was to drive out insects, but Prabhupada also considered it purifying. Although he was sometimes disturbed by the workers hammering, he found the atmosphere otherwise peaceful. Only a few devotees were staying there, and Prabhupada gave his attention to translating or to speaking with guests and to the devotees in charge of developing his Mayapur center. He would express his desires especially to Bhavananda Maharaj and Ch.42 Maharaj and worked his will through them. The devotees living in the building with Prabhupada considered themselves menial servants in Prabhupada's personal house. Of course, all the buildings in ISKCON belonged to Prabhupada, yet in Mayapur that sense was intensified. Generally, the devotees in each particular center would raise money to support their center, but Prabhupada personally took charge of getting funds for Mayapur. He had begun a Mayapur Vrindavan Trust Fund of donations from his disciples and interest from bonds and security deposits. If money was misspent, energy misused, or the building damaged in any way, Prabhupada would become very concerned. Now that he was personally on the scene, he often walked about giving detailed instructions and demanding that discrepancies be corrected. The pink and reddish building was like a huge transcendental ship, and Srila Prabhupada, as captain, would walk the wide verandas, giving strict orders to all mates for keeping everything ship-shape. So here, Prabhupada comes to Mayapur now. The building was being constructed, but he took 2 rooms on the second floor. One has his bedroom and one has his study. And meanwhile, construction work was going on in the other parts of the building. And in the evening, Prabhupada was happy that he is in the transcendental atmosphere in Mayapur would help him regain his strength and health. And is rejoicing every moment they're passing there. Janani Vasa, who was the temple pujari, would come to Prabhupada's room and he would light the frankincense and fill the room with smokes. This was to drive away all the insects, and Prabhupada also felt it was purifying. And sometimes Prabhupada would be disturbed by the hammering and all the construction work happening, but everything else was peaceful, and he would give instructions and express his desires to Bhavananda Maharaj and Ch.42 Maharaj, and they would take actions accordingly. And the devotees who were living in the building with Prabhupada, they used to consider themselves as servants in Prabhupada's personal house. And even though all the buildings in ISKCON belong to Prabhupada, Mayapur was in more particular, had that sense because Prabhupada personally took care of getting the funds for Mayapur. He also had begun a trust fund where he got donations from his disciples, and all the interest from security deposits would be deposited there. And he would be concerned if things were not spent correctly or misused. He would also give instructions walking around and also make sure that those discrepancies are corrected.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Nipa, please read.
One day, Prabhupada was walking on the veranda near his room. The other rooms were locked, and as Prabhupada walked alone, he would open the window shutters and look in. Suddenly, he turned to Satadhanya, Satadhanya, who waited on call nearby. The fan is going on inside, and this room is empty and locked. Prabhupada said, "Who has done this?" Shatadanya didn't know. Whoever has done this, Prabhupada said, is a rascal. He should know he is a rascal. For 2 days after, Prabhupada continued to refer the incident with disgust. One day after a huge wind and rainstorm, water covered the 12-foot wide marble veranda outside Prabhupada's room. Bhavananda Goswami, taking a large squeegee a devotee had made, began cleaning the marble floor, and Srila Prabhupada came to his door to watch. "This is the way to clean marble," Prabhupada said. "Don't polish it with wax, but just keep plenty of fresh water and every day in the morning wipe it off. In this way, the marble will become naturally polished and will shine like glass." Prabhupada felt affection and deep gratitude for those devotees dedicating their lives to Mayapur project. On one night, he called Bhavananda to his room and began asking him about the devotees. Suddenly, Prabhupada began crying. "I know it is difficult for all you Western boys and girls," he said. "You are so dedicated serving here in my mission. I know you cannot even get prasadam, and I think that you cannot even get milk, and that you have given up your opulent life to come here and you do not complain. I am very much indebted to all of you." Bhavananda, the marble workers lived in some chatai houses right near the construction site. There was a hand pump just outside the building, and that's where he took our bath and where the workers got the water for the cement. Some distance off were two toilets, one for the men and one for the women. It was just two holes in the ground, and each hole surrounded by a chatai wall. The storms and the rain would come, and we would have to sludge through the mud in the fields to go to the toilet. There were snakes all over the place. It was wild. It was a construction place. No one lives on a construction site, but we did. Srila Prabhupada made us move in there. It was good for us. No bathrooms, nothing, just open floors with concrete. Although the devotees endured the austerities of life living at Mayapur Center construction site, they sometimes felt it was difficult. It was too difficult, but Srila Prabhupada never considered it difficult. He would encourage the devotees. Mayapur was so wonderful. You can live on the air and water alone. So one day when Prabhupada was walking on the veranda near the room, and the rooms were locked, Prabhupada was walking alone. He opened the window shutters and looked in, and he turned to Shatadhanya, who waited on a call nearby, and the fan was going on inside, and the room was empty and locked. Prabhupada said, "Who has done this?" And Shatadhanya didn't know, and Prabhupada said, "Whoever has done this is a rascal. He should know he is a rascal." For 2 days, Prabhupada continued to refer this incident with disgust.
I just,
And
I,
one
I just want to, it's very simple. Prabhupada is very concerned on Krishna's energy and Krishna's money. Prabhupada didn't, this whole paragraph, what you say, he didn't appreciate when we are trying to waste Krishna's energy and Krishna's money. That's the whole thing. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Prabhupada. One day, after a huge wind and rainstorm, water covered the marble, which was a 12-foot wide veranda outside, like marble out in veranda outside Prabhupada's room. And Bhavananda Goswami took a large squeegee a devotee had made and began to clean the marble floor. And Prabhupada came to the door to watch this, and he asked, is this the way to clean marble? Don't polish it with wax, but just keep plenty of fresh water every day, and in the morning wipe it off. And in this way, the marble will become polished naturally and will shine like a glass. This is how he explained. And then Prabhupada felt affection and gratitude for his devotees who were dedicating their lives to Mayapur project. And one night he called Bhavananda and began asking about his devotees. Suddenly Prabhupada was seen crying and said, "I know it is difficult, like for all the Western boys and girls. They are so dedicated serving in this mission, and they don't even get the prasadam. And when he thinks that you don't even get the milk, that you have given up your opulent life to come here and you do not even complain about it." And he said he's so much indebted to all of them. And Bhavananda replied, the marble workers lived in some chatai houses right near the construction site, and there was hand pump outside the building, and that's where they took their bath. And the workers got the water for the cement also from there. And some distance off, there were two toilets, one for men and one for women. It was just like two holes in the ground, and each hole was surrounded by a chatai wall. The storms and rain would come and would sludge through the mud in the fields, and there were snakes all over the place. It was wild. It was a construction site, and no one actually lives on the construction site, but they did. And Srilama Prabhupada made them move in there. It was good for them. There were no bathrooms, nothing. It was just like open floors with concrete. And all the devotees endured these austerities at Mayapur center. He sometimes felt it was difficult, but Srila Prabhupada never felt it was difficult. He would encourage the devotees, and Mayapur was so wonderful. You can live on the air and water alone. This is how he encouraged.
Thank you. Prasanthi?
Bhavananda, we were able to face up to so many difficulties because we just took it as our order from Srila Prabhupada. There was no conception of ever leaving. What else would I do? This was my order. Take Mayapur. I am giving you Mayapur. Take it, develop it, and enjoy it. There was no question in our minds to go somewhere else. The surrounding grounds were rice fields, and to get to the temple building from the entrance of the property, a distance of more than 200 yards, devotees would have to walk on paths made by ridges of earth that separated one rice field from another. The kitchen, which was made of ta- tarpaulin and bamboo, was located near the entrance to the property. The devotees had to live without electricity much of the time, since the power supply was often cut off. They would use kerosene lamps at night, and Prabhupada said the lamps should be taken apart every day, the wicks trimmed, and the glass washed. In the future, he said, you should grow castor plants and crush the seeds and take the oil for burning. Prabhupada used the devotees Prabhupada told the devotees how to build simple dwellings. He also wanted them to build a wall with a gate along the front of the property. They should build small rooms, hutments, he called them, against the wall. Devotees could stay in these simple cottages. They should plant coconut and banana trees. Raising the money, buying the land, arranging for workers and materials, it had been an arduous struggle, replete with bureaucratic delays, forms, fees, short supplies, and the like. Prabhupada would not tolerate any carelessness or waste. The building, which was turning out to be so artistic, substantial, and useful, was actually a gift from Lord Krishna. So, to live here in Krishna's building was to reciprocate loving with the Lord. The devotees should think of serving Krishna, not of becoming comfortable and forgetting the purpose of both the buildings and of life. The slamming of doors, although seemingly a minor fault, greatly disturbed Srila Prabhupada. The, it symptomized carelessness and misuse. And Prabhupada said the sound cracked his heart. One time Prabhupada came out of his room and called out, who is that slamming the doors? No one knows from where this build no one knows from where this building has come. You take it for granted that it is here, but no one cares. Bhavananda says that they have to face many difficulties, but they never thought of leaving because they or, took it like the order of Srila Prabhupada. He told them to take Mayapur, take it, develop it, and enjoy it. So there is no question on their minds to ever go back. So the place is covered with rice fields, and they have to cross the rice fields from the ridges, and they have to walk on that path and go to the construction area. The kitchen is very closer to the entrance of the property, And devotees don't have any electricity. Their power supply is often cut. And Prabhupada suggested that lamps should be taken apart every day and the wicks trimmed and the glasses washed and the glass washed. And he also suggested them to grow different kinds of plants like castor plants so that they can crush the seeds and get oil. And also he asked them to plant coconut and banana trees so that they can be useful for Krishna service and also for devotees. And he asked them to build small rooms again. He, hutments he called them against the wall, and the devotees can live in simple cottages. So they used to raise money. They bought the land, and then they also got the materials for construction. And all this is a arduous struggle, and they have to go through a lot of things like bureaucratic delays and supply short, um, and also forms and fees. And the building is coming out very artistic, very substantial, useful, and they find the reciprocative. They found the reciprocation love from Krishna, and the devotees, even though they are not comfortable, they are forgetting that, and the purpose is to build, and not the purpose of both the building and of the life. They are not forgetting that. Prabhupada one time heard the slamming of the door and immediately criticized that because it represents carelessness. And as a spiritual guru, he was chastising them and telling them not to take it for granted.
Thank you. This is actually, this message is for everybody. I hope you understand this. How much pain and labor devotees has put for. What did he say? Take it, develop it, enjoy it. Actually, he's giving us so we can relish these places. But at the same time, Prabhupada said, slamming of the door, it means you say you don't care what that sacrifices is being done. So he said, then he said it's hurting because so much of labor. Only he knows, the disciples knows how they've been put. No one knows where this building has come. You take it for granted and that it is here, but no one cares. So basically, any Prabhupada's moment, when we Krishna consciousness, he says that we should not take for granted. We should be very grateful and appreciate what we are given. That's what I understand actually. Okay, Pranath Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. More often, however, Srila Prabhupada displayed a rose-like softness, an intimate, informal, and affectionate nature. The holy dham of Mayapur was the spiritual world, Goloka Vrindavan. So the devotees there were living with Prabhupada in the spiritual world, more than most any other place in the world. The devotees living in Mayapur knew they could walk into Prabhupada's room and see him. He sometimes even walked into their rooms. While they were working, reading, or talking, he might suddenly walk in and speak with them, asking how they felt and how they were adjusting to living in India. It is difficult living here, he would ask. I think India is too hot. What do you think? Even with the building incomplete, many guests were coming, especially to talk with Prabhupada, who patiently spent many hours each day speaking about Krishna consciousness with guests who came to inquire about his movement or who came only to talk about themselves and their own philosophy. Sometimes he would remark that an individual had wasted his time, but he never stopped anyone from seeing him. One wealthy Hindu man, Mr. Brijratan Mohata, and his wife, a daughter of multimillionaire R.D. Birla, visited Prabhupada from Calcutta. Srila Prabhupada took care in properly hosting his guests and he personally reviewed the menu and briefed his disciples on serving Mr. Mohata and his wife. Offering prasadam was an important part of the Vaishnavas' etiquette, and Srila Prabhupada always stressed that the devotees immediately offer prasadam to visitors. You should always be able to offer water, hot puris, and eggplant bhaji, fried eggplant, and sweets, Prabhupada said. Even when guests appeared shy, Prabhupada would insist that they take a full meal. Mrs. Mohata, even though a member of one of the wealthiest families in India, was satisfied with the simple hospitality of Srila Prabhupada and his disciples offered. The room she and her husband stayed in was unfinished. The slate floors hadn't been polished, and construction work was going on all around. And the devotees could only offer them a mattress on the floor with a pillow, yet they appeared to be quite satisfied and appreciative. Should I continue, Prabhu? So, this is showing the Prabhupada that, telling us that Prabhupada also often displayed a rose-like softness, very affectionate, and uh, also that since all of them were in Goloka Vrindavan, in Mayapur Dham, uh, it was like devotees were living in the spiritual world. And devotees knew that they could walk into Prabhupada's room, see him. Likewise, he sometimes walked into their rooms and would suddenly come, walk in and speak with them, and find out about their well-being, and ask how it was living in India. And then many guests were coming, although the building was incomplete, especially to spend time with Prabhupada, talk to him. And Prabhupada patiently spent a lot of time every day speaking about Krishna consciousness with the guests who came. Some of them came to find out more about the movement. Some just came to talk about themselves and their own philosophy. Um, but no matter what the reason was, he never stopped seeing anyone. Um, and once a wealthy Hindu man, Mr. Brijratan Mohata, and his wife was daughter of Auntie Birla. They visited Prabhupada from Calcutta, and Prabhupada took very good care of them, and personally reviewed the menu, and instructed his disciples, on serving them nice prasadam. And it is one of the most important part of our Vaishnava etiquette. And Prabhupada always stressed that whenever visitors come, that we should offer prasadam, and also specifies what to offer: water, hot puris, plant bhajis, and sweets. um, and Prabhupada would always insist, even if guests were shy. And they were from a wealthy family, from one of the wealthiest families in India, but they were very satisfied with Prabhupada's hospitality, and how the devotees served them. And although the room was unfinished in which they were there, the floors were not polished, and there was everywhere construction going on. But devotees offered them. That's all they could offer: a mattress on the floor with a pillow. But they were very appreciative and satisfied with the service.
Bhavan.
Help me. Bhavananda, Srila Prabhupada introduced us to many of the details of Indian culture at Mayapur. He had us put down mattresses covered with sheets in his room. In 1970, in Los Angeles, he had asked me to sew sheets together to make a covering for the rug in his room. And then he had gotten down on his hands and knees right next to me. and we had smoothed out the wrinkles in the sheet. So he had us do that same thing in Mayapur, where we put mattresses from one end of the room to the other with bolster pillows against the wall. Now you have white sheet covers, he said, and you change these every day. When Bengali gentlemen visited Srila Prabhupada in his room, they would sit on these mattresses around the edge of the room, their backs against the bolster pillows. He was very aristocratic. The whole mood was that he was the Mahant, the master of the house, the Acharya. But also the aristocratic Bengali gentleman saw that he was re-establishing the old aristocratic mood from the early 1900s or 1920s. It was from Prabhupada's old days with the Malik family, and it was rapidly dwindling. At that time, you couldn't find a semblance of old culture anywhere, because all those families had become degraded and their wealth gone. When the evening's multitude of varieties of insects gathered around Prabhupada's light, he would sometimes comment on how they were such wonderful creations of God. This little insect, he said one evening, is both pilot and flying machine in one. Here there are hundreds of insects flying together, and yet there are no collisions. That is God's arrangement. They never crash because the super soul is present, one in every heart. Let the material scientists manufacture such a wonderful machine with a built-in pilot that will not crash. When one man flies and there are two planes, they have to be very careful. While a few devotees sat on the sheet-covered mattresses in his room, Prabhupada sat on his slightly raised asan, leaning back against a white bolster pillow. Both spiritual master and disciple enjoyed bliss in speaking and hearing Krishna consciousness. The devotees wanted to hear Prabhupada's words and follow his will. And he wanted to instruct them. But these insects, Prabhupada continued, are not perfect. They're flying to the light. That also means they're attracted to death. So they are just like the materialists. The materialists are building skyscrapers, yet they don't know what will happen at death. Henry Ford and other big capitalists had to die, but so many others are trying to become just like them. They do not know it means their death also. They're also like these small insects. In the morning, we simply find heaps of them all day. So Bhavananda, Bhavananda Maharaj explained how Prabhupada was teaching the devotees the Indian culture back from the time of Prabhupada's time, back in early 1900s and 1920s, where when guests would come over, they would offer a mattress, and they had white sheet covers, and Prabhupada said they can change them every day. And there'll be a white sheet cover on the mattress, and there'll be bolster pillows offered to whoever would come. And whenever people would come, they would sit on these mattresses, and the backs would be against the wall with the pillows supporting them, bolster pillows. Yeah.
Very nice.
And so Bhavananda Maharaj saying how it's aristocratic, and like the whole mood was that Prabhupada was like the Mahant, master of the house, but he was still offering a place for them to sit. And just again, how it was from the times of the early 1900s, 1920s, and now because you can find any of them, of those types of people now, it's all being degraded and like slowly going away. And then one evening, Prabhupada had saw so many varieties of insects in one place. And Prabhupada took this opportunity to tell devotees how they were such wonderful creations of God, because even though they're flying in hundreds, they're not colliding. But they're not also perfect. And that is because they are flying to the light, which is basically saying they're flying to their death. And in the same way, all the people in the material world are doing the same thing. They're just trying to follow the old people who were trying, the people from back then who build all these things. But those people died anyway, so what's the point of following the same way? And the materialistic people are not understanding, and they're just following in the same path.
Is it nice analogy to see these hundreds of thousands of flies, not flies, insects in the night? It's not flies, insects. Insects and mosquitoes. They're flying constantly, but they never collide. Interesting, they never collide. I hope. Now, we haven't seen them collide. So Prabhupada said because the super soul is there. Perfectly. And not only that, what he said, they are the flights,
Pilot and flying machine.
the flying machine and pilot also
Pilot,
there.
flying, and
Such a vision. Yeah. So, AJ, you please read.
Often while Prabhupada was talking in his room, the lights would suddenly go out and devotees would bring in kerosene lamps. And each night while Prabhupada was speaking, the pujari would come, filling the room with frankincense smoke. Ghee lamps faintly illuminated the large teakwood bas-relief carvings of Radha and Krishna on the wall opposite of Prabhupada's desk. During the summer visit, Prabhupada further revealed his vision for ISKCON's Mayapur development. The devotees were already aware that the plan was vast and would cost millions of dollars. They now had one building, but this was only the beginning. In the total plan, this building was almost insignificant. Prabhupada spoke about the colossal temple and its great dome rising above a transcendental city of Mayapur. Above a transcendental city. This Mayapur Chandradaya Mandir would house the greatest planetarium in the world, depicting the universe as it described in the Vedic literature. To execute such a project, Prabhupada wanted to train his disciples in the Vedic arts, now dying in Bengal. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had been greatly interested in using dioramas to depict the Leela of Krishna and Lord Chaitanya. And now Prabhupada wanted his own disciples to learn the art by studying under local Mayapur artists. In June, Bhararaja, Adideva, Murthy, and Asana arrived to begin learning the art of doll making. Prabhupada also wanted the disciples to learn about making mridrangas, and a potter began coming every day to teach Asana how to mold and fire the clay shells. The devotees converted Prabhupada's original straw cottage into a workshop, and Prabhupada began inviting other disciples to come to Mayapur. Mayapur is already wonderful, being the transcendental birthplace of Lord Krishna. By utilizing Western talents to develop this place, certainly it will become unique in the world. The Mayapur city, Prabhupada said, would be the fulfillment of the desires of the previous acharyas. The city would grow to a population of 50,000 and would become the spiritual capital of the world. With its gigantic temple in the center and separate quarters for Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Sudras, the city would be a model for all other cities. The day would come when the world cities would be ruined and humanity would take refuge in cities modeled after Mayapur. The development of Mayapur would mark the beginning of a Krishna-conscious world. Thus, the influence of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would increase, and his prediction would manifest in every town and village. My name will be chanted. So every day it sounds like the power would go out, and they would, power would go out, and the devotees would have to bring in kerosene lamps, and the room would be filled with incense smoke, and ghee lamps would light the carvings of Radha and Krishna that were on the wall there. And then we find out more about the development of Mayapur and ISKCON, or ISKCON and Mayapur, and the devotees were, they knew it was going to be super expensive overall, but at least now they had one building, and it was something to start, but it seemed insignificant, in the grand scheme of things. And Prabhupada had, always has these big plans, right? He wanted this colossal temple with a planetarium that shows all the universes as as outlined in Vedic literature. And to get this stuff done, he wanted to have the disciples learn all the things, to be trained in all the Vedic arts, like diorama making, doll making. They wanted them to begin how to make mridrangas, and so they were learning how to mold clay and fire the clay. And he just kept inviting more and more people to start learning all these things so he could, kind of achieve the vision that he had. So he was saying, Mayapur is already wonderful because it's where Krishna was born, but once we add this Western talent to develop it even more, it's going to become a very unique city in the world. And he had this he says it was the desire of previous acharyas, and it would the city would just get bigger and bigger, and it would become the spiritual capital of the world, and the temple would be in the middle, and then it would be broken up in multiple quarters for the different for Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas and Sudras, and every other city would then be modeled after this city. And it was, like you said, the start of a Krishna conscious world, and it would be part of Sri Chaitanya's ultimate plan that in every town and village, Hare Krishna will be chanted, the names of Krishna will be chanted.
Thank you. Asanti, did you read? Did I ask you to read yet?
Yes, Prabhuji.
You can read again, please.
Prabhupada said that Mayapur should eventually become more easily accessible by bridge from Navadvipa, by motor launch from the Ganges from Calcutta, and from all parts by air. In Bengal, millions were by birth followers of Lord Chaitanya, and they would recognize and take up Krishna consciousness as pure form of their own culture. There is a saying, what Bengal does, the rest of India follows. So if Bengal becomes reformed and purified by Krishna consciousness, example of American Vaishnavas, then all India would follow. And when all India becomes Krishna conscious, the whole world would follow. I have given you the kingdom of God, Prabhupada said to his Mayapur managers. Now take it, develop it, and enjoy it. Throughout the month of June, Prabhupada continued to live happily and peacefully in the not yet completed buildings of the Mayapur Chandrodaya Mandir. Although he had been ill with the cough since Los Angeles, a cough he had been unable to cure while traveling in the West. On coming to Mayapur, his health had recovered. In Mayapur, I'm much improved from how I was in Los Angeles. The great advantage here is that there is always open air and a good breeze, which is naturally very good for any breathing difficulties. Certainly, Mayapur is by far a better place than Los Angeles because you can enjoy the free air here. The climate is not too hot, but a little moist with humidity. But on a whole, it is very pleasing. Our building is most super excellently situated, and it is the experience of many respectable outsiders that while the outer atmosphere is unbearably hot, in our buildings it is pleasing. Prabhupada said that Mayapur should eventually be accessible either by water from Ganges from Calcutta or by a bridge from Navadvipa or through air also. So it has to connect all parts of the world. And but in Bengal, millions were by birth followers of Lord Chaitanya, and they recognized Krishna consciousness. And there is a saying that what Bengal follows, rest of the India would follow. So if Bengal becomes reformed and purified, then all India will follow. Then when India becomes Krishna conscious, then all world will also follow. And he explains that he has given the kingdom of God, and they have to take it, develop it, and enjoy it. Prabhupada used to have cough. Prabhupada, he had been ill in Los Angeles with a cough, but after coming to Mayapur, his health recovered. There is good breeze, and also it is also good for anybody who has breathing difficulties. In Mayapur, Mayapur is always better place than Los Angeles because of this free air, and the climate is a little bit humid but not too hot. And even if it is hot outside, the building is pleasant to live in. That's all.
Okay. Nipa?
Prabhupada praised the constant pleasurable breezes that passed through the building. He called them Venkuta breezes. Sometimes, however, a violent storm would suddenly appear. Although severe, these storms were also beautiful, with continuous lightning like neon lights filling the sky. One day a storm arose and the winds began to howl through the building. Noticing that Prabhupada's doors and windows were open, Shatadanya rushed into the room and began frantically closing them. But Prabhupada, seated at his desk, said, "Stop, leave all the windows open." "Prabhupada," Chatananda Shatadanya protested, "the storm is here. Just leave them open," Prabhupada said. As the wind rushed through his room at more than 15 miles an hour, Prabhupada smiled. "There's no place in the world like this," he said, his saffron robes billowing. Prabhupada stood on the roof of his Mayapur building, looking over to the birthplace of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu less than a mile away. Actually, he said to Bhavananda Maharaj, "their claim to the birthplace of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is not very important. Is Krishna famous for having been born in Mathura? No, he's famous for his activities. Similarly, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is not famous for having been born in Mayapur. He is famous for his activities, for his Sankirtana preaching. This Mayapur Chandrodaya Mandir is the preaching of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Therefore, I want a place that is so attractive because of the activities of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that everyone will come here." So praised Prabhupada praised the breezes that passed and he called them Venkuta breezes. However, there was a violent storm that suddenly appeared, and although severe, these storms were beautiful and continued lightning like neon lights filling the sky. And one day the storm arose and there were winds howling through the building. Noticing that Prabhupada's doors and windows were open, Satya Danya rushed into the room and frantically started closing all the doors and windows. But Prabhupada, seated, said to him, "Stop and leave all the windows open." And Satyadanya said, "But there is a storm." And Prabhupada still replied, "Just leave them open." The wind rushed through the room and at like 15 miles an hour. And Prabhupada smiled and said, "There's no place in the world like this." And he was there in his saffron robes billowing. And Prabhupada stood on the roof of Mayapur building and he was looking at Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's birthplace. And actually, he said to Bhavananda Maharaj that the birthplace of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is not very important. Similarly, like Krishna famous for being born in Mathura? And the answer is no. He said it's because of is famous because of the activities. Similarly, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is not famous for having been born in Mayapur, but it is his activities and the Sankirtana move preaching. And this Mayapur Chandrodaya Mandir is the preaching of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Therefore, he wants a place that is attractive for the activities and of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and that everyone will come here.
Thank you.
Oh, not here. While in Calcutta, before coming to Mayapur, Prabhupada had called several senior disciples into his room. "I have had many requests," he had said to them, "to translate Chaitanya Bhagavat. But I am going to translate the entire Chaitanya Charitamrita. Is that all right?" "Oh yes, Prabhupada," Bhavanand Goswami had replied, "that is wonderful." Decades ago, Prabhupada had written essays based on the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and over the years he had translated some of the verses and written purports to them. Then in America in 1968, he had completed Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, a summary study based on certain important passages of Chaitanya Charitamrita. During his stay in Mayapur, however, he began a translation and commentary of Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami's Chaitanya Charitamrita, beginning with the 7th chapter. As he progressed, he found a wonderful momentum and said he would publish a volume starting with chapter 7 for Lord Chaitanya's appearance day in March. Deciding to complete the entire Chaitanya Charitamrita, he suspended his work on Srimad Bhagavatam. In one of the first verses of the 7th chapter, Krishnadas Kaviraj states, "Let me offer my obeisances to Lord Shri Krishna, who has manifested himself in 5 as a devotee, a expansion of a devotee, incarnation of a devotee, pure devotee, and devotional energy." Prabhupada wrote that the only way for people to be elevated in love of Krishna in the age of Kali is by the mercy of the Panchatattva or Lord Chaitanya in his form of five personalities. One should offer obeisances to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu by chanting the Panchatattva mantra. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Sri Advaita Gadadhara, Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. This mantra should be recited before one chants the Maha Mantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. There are 10 offenses in the chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, Prabhupada wrote. But these are not considered in the chanting of the Panchatattva Maha Mantra. One must first take shelter of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, learn the Panchatattva Maha Mantra, and then chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. So here, a little bit. So in Calcutta, before coming to Mayapur, Prabhupada called several of his disciples into his room and tells them that he is getting requests to translate Chaitanya Bhagavat, but he is going to translate the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And is that okay? And Bhavanand Goswami replies, that is wonderful. In the past, Prabhupada had written essays on Chaitanya Charitamrita, and he also translated some of the verses and written purports. In 1968 in America, he completed the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, which was a summary of the important passages of Chaitanya Charitamrita. During his stay in Mayapur, he started a translation and commentary of Krishnadas Kaviraj Chaitanya Goswami's Chaitanya Charitamrita, beginning with the 7th chapter. And he was planning to complete a volume for the Chaitanya, Lord Chaitanya's appearance day for Gaur Purnima that March. And in the 7th chapter, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami writes, let me offer my obeisances to Lord Sri Krishna, who manifested himself in the Panchatattva 5, which is Sri Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Advaita and Gadadhar Goswami and Sri Vasadi Srivas Thakur. And those are the 5 personalities. Before chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, one has to chant the Panchatattva. And for chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, there are the 10 offenses. But for chanting the Panchatattva, there is no those offenses are not considered in chanting the Panchatattva. And first one should take the shelter of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, learn the Panchatattva Maha Mantra, and then chant Hare Krishna Maha Mantra.
Verse after verse of the 7th chapter confirm the essential principles of Srila Prabhupada's mission and attested that he was teaching exactly after the method advised by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The characteristics of Krishna are understood to be a storehouse of transcendental love. Although that storehouse of love certainly came with Krishna when he was present, it was sealed. But when Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came with his other associates, the Panchatattva, they broke the seal and plundered the storehouse to taste transcendental love of Krishna. The more they tasted it, the more their thirst for it grew. Sri Panchatattva themselves danced again and again and thus made it easier to drink nectarian love of Godhead. They danced, cried, laughed, and chanted like madmen, and in this way they distributed love of Godhead. In commenting on these verses, Prabhupada wrote, the present Krishna consciousness movement follows the same principle, and therefore, simply by chanting and dancing, we have received good responses all over the world. It is to be understood, however, that this chanting and dancing do not belong to this material world. They are actually transcendental activities. For the more one engages in chanting and dancing, the more he can taste the nectar of transcendental love of Godhead. By the phrase Krishna consciousness movement, Prabhupada spoke not only of his own disciples and his Krishna Consciousness Society, but also of the movement inaugurated by Lord Chaitanya. Just as the original personality of Godhead and the deity of Krishna in the temple were the same, so the movement of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Prabhupada's Krishna Consciousness movement were identical. In distributing love of Godhead, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his associates did not consider who was a fit candidate and who was not, nor where such distribution should or nor where such distribution should or should not take place. They made no conditions. Wherever they got the opportunity, the members of the Panchatattva distributed love of Godhead. So, Prabhupada it's confirmed that, Prabhupada's mission and the principles were exactly the same as advised by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And, you know, uh, and, and the Krishna is the storehouse of all transcendental love, the characteristics of Krishna, but he didn't fully reveal himself when he came. But when Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came with his associates, the Panchatattva, then everything the seal was broken, and the storehouse, that storehouse, was broken and plundered, so we all can taste the transcendental love of Krishna. And uh, and Panchatattva themselves, they danced and made it easier to drink that love of Godhead. And they danced, cried, laughed, and chanted like madmen, and this way they distributed the love of Godhead. And Prabhupada writes that our Krishna consciousness movement is based on the same principle. Simply by chanting and dancing, that this whole movement was getting good response all over the world. And but it's not ordinary, this chanting and dancing. It doesn't belong to this material world. These are transcendental activities, and the more we engage in this chanting and dancing, the more we can taste the nectar of that love of Godhead. And um, this Krishna consciousness movement actually is not just about Prabhupada and his disciples and the Krishna Consciousness Society. Prabhupada says that it also is the movement inaugurated by Lord Chaitanya, and it's just like the personality of Godhead himself and the deity of Krishna in the temple were the same. So these are identical. There's no difference in the movement of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the Krishna consciousness movement initiated by Srila Prabhupada. And in distributing this love of Godhead, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his associates never considered, who was fit, not fit, whether it's an appropriate place or not, and no conditions were made. And wherever they got the opportunity, the Panchatattva distributed love of Godhead. And
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Go ahead.
For Srila Prabhupada, this verse directly confirmed the instruction he had received from his spiritual master, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, that people of all births could become Vaishnavas, Brahmanas, and Sannyasis. Here was direct evidence from the scripture. Yet Prabhupada, like his own spiritual master, had often received criticism from the caste-conscious Brahmanas of India. With proof in hand, Prabhupada now challenged his envious critics. There are some rascals who dare to speak against the mission of Lord Chaitanya by criticizing the Krishna conscious movement for accepting Europeans and Americans as Brahmanas and offering them sannyas. But here is an authoritative statement that in distributing love of Godhead, one should not consider whether the recipients are Europeans, Americans, Hindus, Muslims, etc. The Krishna conscious movement should be spread wherever possible, and one should accept those who thus become Vaishnavas as being greater than Brahmanas, Hindus, or Indians. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu desired that his name be spread in each and every town and village on the surface of the globe. Therefore, when the cult of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu spread all over the world, should those who embrace it not be accepted as Vaishnavas, Brahmanas, and Sannyasis? These foolish arguments are sometimes raised by envious rascals, but Krishna conscious devotees do not care about them. They strictly follow the principles set down by the Panchatattva. So the verse that was basically direct proof of how Prabhupada can initiate these Westerners or anyone into becoming Vaishnavas, Brahmanas, or Sannyasis, but there was always these envious critics of and these caste conscious Brahmanas of India who are trying to like degrade what Prabhupada is doing just by saying that they can become a Brahmana or Sannyasi. And these people are called as rascals because they dare to speak against the mission of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and they're criticizing Krishna and the movement because they're just saying that only Indians can become devotees, but actually anyone can. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had wanted that the chanting of the Hare Krishna be spread all over the whole world, that every village and town should chant the Hare Krishna mantra, and that is what Prabhupada is trying to fulfill. And so therefore, if that happens, then those people should be accepted as Vaishnavas and can be initiated into becoming a Brahmin and sannyas, because they embrace to become a Vaishnava and follow Krishna consciousness. And there are always these arguments because people are envious, but the devotees do not care about them, and they follow the principles set down by the Panchatattva.
So even if you contemplate much, we understand that it's because of this caste Brahmins, the earth has suffered because caste Brahmins did not do their monopoly, and we can say that they didn't do their job, what's supposed to do. They didn't allow also, looks like, growing others, becoming Brahmanas. Neither they lived. So that created a lot of disaster in the society, the degradation of the cultures because of that. So now finally it is gone, after how much? You can 100 years of struggle now. So now everybody's looks like, except I'm seeing in YouTube also, there's so many places. Oh, people are accepting now in the culture. I don't know why they are saying, because Prabhupada has already made everybody to accept this culture. It was not available. A lot of struggle. So we will see more and more this, accepting, embracing the Vedic culture, especially Krishna consciousness. Any quick comments or reflections? Hope everyone doing well. Hari Bol. Hari. Thursday, we have a Saturday. I think I announced. I don't know if I announced or not. We'll have Radhika Raman Prabhu, who is going to speak on Saturday. He's very famous from Utah University, and is very scholar. He's going to speak on Jiva Goswami. I'll send more details to everybody. So both Philadelphia and us, we are organizing together, just sharing. Okay, so with this, we will end here. We will continue the Mayapur project tomorrow. And it is a great completion that how Bombay finally, Krishna made it happen. Prabhupada is satisfied. Such a miracles, and unbelievable. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna. Shri Prabhupada ki jai. Lilamrita ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Have a good night.
Good night.